Hi all, welcome to a monitor too wide. I'm an old guy playing games. Many games have data overlaid on the screen. That overlay is usually called a HUD or heads-up display. When those HUDs are displayed on an ultrawide monitor, there can be a wide variety of results. Assuming the HUD doesn't fail outright, I divide them into four broad categories. The Corner HUD, the Tiny HUD, the Hybrid HUD, and the Centered HUD. These are terms I came up with. I have no idea what the official industry terms are, if any. This is an example of the corner HUD. This is common with older games, but you may run into it on a newer game as well. The HUD elements are anchored to the four corners. Back in the day when all monitors had roughly the same proportions, this was a perfectly adequate answer. With an ultrawide monitor, this moves a lot of the information being provided out of your central vision. In an action game, you are often consuming this information without really thinking about it. Once it moves too far from your central vision, you may find yourself consciously looking for information you previously absorbed without thinking. For a non-action game, the problem is a little different. You'll likely end up moving your head around trying to find that data, and if buttons are part of the HUD, interacting with them will be less convenient. In neither case is this likely a deal breaker, but it can be a bit annoying at times. This is an example of the Tiny HUD. You are not likely to run into this with newer games, but many resolutions and aspect ratios that are available today were simply unheard of 15 or 20 years ago. This results in many of the HUD elements becoming very small, making them hard to see and read. Put those tiny elements far away from your central vision, and you've compounded the problem. This can be quite annoying, but barring mods or other user changes to adjust this, you may just have to live with it. Games made in the last 10 years or so typically do a good job of scaling HUD elements to your screen, and some even allow you to resize the elements to some degree in the settings. This is an example of a hybrid HUD. Whether it was created specifically for ultra-wide monitors or simply became necessary as games accumulated more information, you start to see some HUD info in the center top and bottom, keeping that data in your central vision. If it was a response to ultra-wide screens, there will almost certainly be some of the most critical data displayed in these central positions. If it was simply a response to needing more places to put data, you can flip a coin as to whether the most important data inhabits these spaces. If the critical data like hit points, mana levels, or cooldowns are kept in the center, this is an elegant answer to the problem for action games. It doesn't really matter much if the minimap is in the corner, but you want to know now if your hit points are getting low. For turn-based games, it's definitely better than the corner HUD, but you will still find yourself having to look around the screen to find everything you want, and if those buttons are in the far corners, you'll be moving your mouse a lot. This is an example of a centered HUD. It essentially appears that the developers decided that the overlay will always be 16 by 9 and centered on the screen. For me, this is a great answer, at least for action games. It keeps all the data right there on the edges of my central vision where I can consume it without a lot of effort. I do see two potential issues with this answer. First, I've mentioned buttons in the HUD on some turn-based games. I suspect most of us would not like buttons floating around not on the edge of the screen. It's just where we are used to them being, and the edge forms something of a backstop in some cases, preventing the mouse pointer from going too far. Second is a potential visual issue. Some people find the black bars on the right and left during cutscenes distracting. This type of overlay may present a similar visual break for people who experience that. I suspect it would only be an issue if the overlay had a pretty defined edge to it. Dragon Age Veilguard used an overlay for some locations to present a foggy or dreamy kind of effect. That overlay was only about 30 by 9. That bothered me a little bit, even though I don't have issues with the black bars in cutscenes. If you have some practical experience with this, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. I don't know if I'd call the centered HUD elegant, but in many ways it's actually more effective than the hybrid HUD. Every HUD implementation will have its own quirks when pushed to 32 by 9, but my experience so far splits them generally into 4 broad categories: the Corner HUD, the Tiny HUD, the Hybrid HUD, and the Centered HUD. The Tiny HUD is the most likely to be a big problem. Even if you're not on an ultra-wide, it'll be small. If you can't see it and read it, it might as well not be there. Older games will tend to be the Corner or Tiny HUD. For newer games, I generally expect to see either a Hybrid or Centered HUD. If a modern game pushes important information all the way into the corners on a 32 by 9 display, I start wondering how deeply ultrawide support was considered during development. I understand that resource constraints may prevent small teams from spending much time on ultrawide support. For larger teams, I expect ultrawide considerations to start in the design phase. That doesn't mean it has to be perfect, but I should see that it was considered. None of these HUD types make a game bad. A great game can have a bad HUD and still be an enjoyable experience. It is just one ingredient in the recipe. If you have any questions about HUDs or gaming on an ultrawide monitor, or have any observations of your own to add, please comment below. I love a great discussion. As always, please like and subscribe. That lets the algorithm know that people are interested in content about ultrawide monitors, and you'll get notified when I drop new videos. Goodness all around. Have a good one.